Well, hello everyone. This is Mitchell Moat from the University of Tennessee and Tennessee State University Extension Program in Rutherford County. I'm one of the extension agents there, and today I'm bringing you episode number 2 of this series that we're calling What's Wrong Now? And the purpose of this series is just to share with you some of the common problems that you might find in your landscape, your lawn, or your garden this time of the year. So we're going to jump right into it. And the first thing we'll do is walk out into the lawn. And for those individuals that have maple trees in their home lawns, it's not uncommon in that late May to early June time frame to walk out and find perfectly green, normal looking, just healthy green maple leaves lying on the lawn. And you wonder, well, why are those leaves out there? Well, if you look a little bit closer and examine those, you may notice on the petioles of those leaves some damaged areas. What caused this, and ultimately what caused those good healthy leaves to drop off? Well, in this case, the culprit is an insect that's called a maple petiole borer, and you see pictured here in this image the larva of the maple petiole borer. So it's pretty small. It's got to fit inside. It's got to fit inside the stem of this petiole here. But the petiole borer is a sawfly. It lays its eggs in the April-May time frame, and those eggs hatch out. That larva then crawls around inside the petiole, and it causes enough damage for the leaves to start dropping off, which typically occurs in that late May to early June time frame. So this is caused by an insect pest. But I guess if there's any good news about it, the good news is this: you can put this insect pest way down on your list of things to worry about, because they don't really cause any significant damage to the plant whatsoever. You know, at best, even in a high population year, only about 10% or so of leaves might be affected. And losing just a few leaves like that is not going to have much negative impact on the plant. So let's don't worry about that one, okay? But that is the maple petiole borer. Very common to see that, those symptoms occurring out on the lawn, those leaves dropping off this time of the year. But keeping with trees, keeping with maple trees, this is an image that was sent to me by a local landscape service provider, sent to me at the extension office this past week. And this maple leaf has these white things on the back of the leaf. So he also brought in a physical sample in addition to the picture. So then we took the physical sample and looked at it a little bit closer, and that's what this image is from, the sample that the landscaper brought into the office. And what we have here are some critters called cottony maple scale. These are scale insects, but the white masses that you see on here are not the scale insects themselves. Those are the things called ovisacs, or the egg sacs, where that female has crawled out on the leaf and laid those eggs. And these brown things that you see here on some of the sacs, that's actually the female scale that laid those eggs. She's all dried up now and dead. And she can lay 2,500 or so eggs in these sacs, and these rascals, they'll hatch out after a little while. And the young ones, the crawlers, they will move out onto the they'll feed on the leaves, on the backside of the leaves. That's where they'll be located for a good while. And then as you get in the latter part of the summer and the fall, they'll migrate out onto limbs, branches of the tree, and they'll feed there on those limbs, on the wood portion. And these are sucking insects, so they're sucking fluid out of the plant, whether it's on the leaf or when they're stuck out there on the woody part of the plant, on the limbs and branches. But they'll feed out there until through the fall and the winter and early part of the spring. At that point, they'll crawl back on the leaves, and they'll mate and then lay their eggs. And the process just keeps going over and over again. And typically, there's just one generation per year. Now, these can cause some damage, enough feeding damage to kill some small branches and cause some thinning out of tree canopies. And plus, they're a soft scale insect, so they do secrete honeydew, and that honeydew is a sticky substance. It's their excrement, and it provides a good environment for sooty mold then to grow on those surfaces where their honeydew has accumulated. Soil applied systemic insecticides that contain imidacloprid or dinotefuran provide good control, applied early in the year when the tree breaks dormancy and begins to put on new leaves. That's a great way to protect those trees from these insects. Brand name examples include insecticides such as Merit or Safari. Keeping with the trees, this is an example of a picture from a local homeowner here in the county of a Bradford pear. And they sent the Bradford pear in, and they think, well, this pear tree's got some problems. And I would agree with them. You can see the swollen areas there on these twigs, and it's kind of a blackened area here with some orange spines or tendrils protruding. Back here, further back on the stem, you can see more of the orange material. Here's another shot a little bit closer up. You can see that orange material there on that swollen area. And here is a little fruit. It's a little Bradford pear that shows the little orange tendrils hanging out of there. What's causing this? Well, that's a disease. It's one of the rust diseases. This is called Cedar-Quince rust. It's very similar to cedar apple rust, but we have 3 or 4 common rust diseases that can attack ornamental plants and fruit trees here where we live. One is cedar apple rust. Of course, it gets on apple trees, crab apples, ornamentals, as well as the fruit producing kind. And then the Cedar-Quince rust, it gets on pear trees, quince, other related plants. And then there's cedar hawthorn rust. The thing they all have in common is that they're a two-host plant. They're a two-host disease, meaning it takes 2 different plants to host this disease for it to survive. It starts off life on the cedar tree in the spring of the year, and then it sporulates and releases those spores, and when it's carried by wind, and they fall on susceptible plants, and then when the conditions are right, they infect those plants. And it just, the cycle just keeps repeating itself. At this point, when you see the orange tendrils out there, they're sporulating, and they're releasing the spores that can be carried to go back and reinfect the cedar trees to keep the process going next year. Under heavy infestation years, when disease pressure on Cedar-Quince rust, cedar apple rust, things like that is high, you can see sometimes like orange dust clouds being blown out of the trees, kind of like the pollen clouds you'll see sometimes in the spring of the year. And vehicles that are parked near these, when the wind blows it out, may have an orange dusty coating. That's the spores being blown out of those trees. Here is a shot of a cedar twig in March, and it shows the Cedar-Quince rust being active at that time. You can see the swollen area along those twigs and this gel-like, orange-colored gel-like material. So at this point, the disease is sporulating on the cedar tree, and then the spores are being released, the wind's picking it up, and carrying this cycle on to go out and infect or try to infect susceptible plants just to keep the process going over and over. What are control options for Cedar-Quince rust? Well, first thing is don't plant susceptible trees in Middle Tennessee because we've got so many cedar trees out there. Some varieties are more susceptible than others, but many of the ornamental plants do have some susceptibility. And even if you do plant one that's more resistant, that doesn't mean it won't get it. It just means that maybe they won't be as noticeable, or the disease pressure will not be as prevalent on a more resistant variety versus one that's not resistant. A thing to keep in mind is that, if your Bradford pear or your other ornamental pear tree does become infected, that's not necessarily mean it's going to die in the next year or so. They can live a long time even when they're infected with Cedar-Quince rust from one year to the next. And they may not deteriorate very rapidly. They may not decline too fast. And what you might do is just leave them there and not do anything, and then replace them with something else when they do start to become unsightly and their canopies begin to thin out. Now, fungicides that contain chlorothalonil, myclobutanil, propiconazole, and others can be used to protect these trees when they're applied prior to infection. But the thing to keep in mind is it's difficult for a homeowner to spray a big tree and get good coverage on it, and that's going to be essential in order to do a good job of controlling Cedar-Quince rust. As we move on, we're going to continue with trees, and this is a shot of an ornamental cherry tree. Let's say you've got an ornamental cherry tree, and you notice that the tree is getting these little brown spots on it, and then the centers of those brown spots fall out and leave holes in the tree. And then maybe as the summer progresses, as we get towards the middle part of the summer, the leaves begin to yellow up, and maybe they're already turning yellow and you're starting to drop leaves. It defoliates prematurely. You're wondering what causes this. Well, this is another one of those diseases. You look at it closer, and sometimes people will look at these leaves and see the holes in it, and they think, well, maybe an insect has been feeding on it. But no, it's not. This is a disease. It's called shot hole disease. And this shot hole disease, the pathogen that causes the disease infects the leaf tissue. It causes those lesions, and then the necrotic or the dead tissue at some point will fall out of those spots, those lesions, leaving the holes in there. And it's not just a cherry tree. It can be anything in that prunus family. Cherries, peaches, plums, nectarines, even cherry laurels, skip laurels, things like that can be affected by shot hole disease. And there are two causes of shot hole disease. There is a fungal variety as well as a bacterial variety. You can't really tell by looking what it is, but typically on the trees like this, more times than not, I guess, it's probably the fungal variety. How can you, what can you do to help control that or protect those trees? One thing is sanitation. Just remove leaves when they fall to the ground. Don't leave them lying there as a source of inoculum for disease pressure in the coming years. And also, you know, there are fungicides. Fungicides that do contain copper or chlorothalonil can be used by homeowners to help protect those trees. And some species of the trees that are susceptible, like some of the cherry trees, some may be more resistant than others, but you would want to look for that maybe if you're going to be choosing one of those to put out in the landscape. A thing to remember is that the fungicides don't cure the disease. They protect uninfected foliage. So the idea is when the tree becomes leafed out, that's when you start making those fungicide applications to protect that foliage to help keep it from becoming infected in the first place. And you may have to make several applications during the course of the springtime during that infection period when it typically occurs in order to keep keep that foliage clean. Another pest that was an example of a pest that was turned into the extension office in the last week was this flower stem, and the little critter on the flower stem there. You see this little aphid, kind of a white colored aphid on there. You know, aphids are a common insect. Here we see on the back of this leaf some little green aphids. They're a common insect pest that attack a variety of plants, both ornamental as well as vegetable plants in your landscape and your vegetable gardens. They are sucking insects, and they do pierce the leaf tissue, and they suck fluid out of that tissue. And as a result of that, you may notice, say on a tomato plant, for example, that the leaves are wanting to cup just a little bit, like like maybe they're a little bit water stressed. Look on the backs of the foliage, on the backs of the leaves, because typically that's where you're going to find these things. You're going to scout for them more on the backs of the leaves as well as on stems, and you look for those insects because they are sucking water, they're sucking fluid out of the plant, and it does cause a little bit of water stress in there, a little drought, if you will, localized in those individual leaves and other foliage areas. And it can cause yellowing of the leaf because as they pierce that leaf tissue, it kills chlorophyll, and chlorophyll is what gives it green color. There are a lot of insecticides that will control these. Again, these are the aphids. Insecticidal soap, very mild insecticide, can do it. Hot weather or all summertime horticultural oil can control them. They're contact only though, so you have to apply it to the backs of the foliage and on the stems really well, because if you don't contact the insect with that particular pesticide, then you have not controlled the insect. And lots of other insecticides too. Your classic insecticides, the pyrethroids, bifenthrin, cyfluthrin, permethrin, malathion, etc. Those will do it. You do want to pay attention to the labels, especially on the oil and the soap. Some of those have hot weather cautions that when the temperatures are above a certain level, it can cause damage to the plants. And some species of plants are sensitive to the oil or the soap themselves. So you want to pay attention to that before you start just haphazardly applying things out there. You may cause some additional damage in addition to what the insect would have caused. Let's go into the vegetable garden now. If you're walking through your vegetable garden and you notice a tomato plant and you see that down on the older leaves, those that are occurring down near the base of the plant, you got some yellowing there. And if you look a little bit closer at those sections, you may notice some dark brown spots on there. And if you look real close, the spots appear to have almost concentric rings, kind of like the rings you would see in a bullseye, for example, or a target of some sort. Well, this is a disease. It's called early blight, and the black spots with the rings in them are textbook examples of what the symptoms of early blight look like. This fungal disease does attack all sorts of different tomato varieties, both hybrid as well as the open pollinator, the heirloom type varieties. Things that you can do to help control early blight in the vegetable garden is rotate crops. Tomatoes, peppers, and those related crops. Don't grow them in the same section of the garden every year, because that just helps you to minimize the buildup of disease inoculum in the soil. As far as tomatoes are concerned, there are a few varieties that are more resistant than others. There's not tons of those though, so you might inquire about their resistance when you're looking to purchase seeds or you're looking to purchase those plants. Mulching around the plants may help some to reduce soil splash up on there, because it can reside in the soil itself. Use soil applied irrigation versus overhead irrigation to minimize wetting the foliage. Good sanitation also. When you see infected foliage down on the lower section of the plants, especially early in the season, removing that affected foliage, taking it out of the garden can be a good thing. And then also just the use of fungicides prior to the disease really showing up, such as they contain active ingredients, chlorothalonil or mancozeb. Those are the two primary ones that are available to homeowners to use in their gardens, can go a long way towards protecting those plants and minimizing damage from the disease and extending the growing season for you. But again, you need to you put the fungicides on there before disease pressure gets really heavy. And I noticed here that chlorothalonil is spelled wrong, but chlorothalonil is how it's spelled. You know, Daconil is a brand name. That's an example of chlorothalonil. And then mancozeb, you may see it labeled just as mancozeb. Both of those can be good fungicides for this disease. And the last one we'll look at, still in the vegetable garden, we've got this squash plant. You'll notice some yellow spotting on the leaf itself. Here's another shot of another leaf. That yellow spotting is a classic symptom of a disease known as downy mildew. This can be a fairly hard disease, cause a fair amount of damage, significant amount of damage on the plant, because it will damage that leaf tissue and cause the leaves to defoliate, you know, lose the green color, not to become non-photosynthetically active. They can't catch sunlight and the plant can't produce energy anymore. Again, the use of fungicides prior to the appearance of the disease can be helpful. And this attacks cucurbits. This disease does. So that's the squash, that's the cucumbers, that's the pumpkins, that's the watermelons, all those plants that fall in that cucurbit family. So some species of cucurbits may have resistant varieties in them. For example, there may be some squash varieties that are more resistant to downy mildew than others. So choose those species as a way to help keep downy mildew populations down in your garden. Also avoid overhead irrigation. And then finally, the use of fungicides that contain chlorothalonil or mancozeb prior to the symptoms appearing can go a long way towards helping keep that disease pressure down and keeping those plants producing throughout your vegetable gardening season. As always, if you have a particular question or something that you need to know some more about, if you've got a pest problem in your lawn or your landscape, you want to give me a call here at the Extension Service office at 615-898-7710. Again, we're still working remotely from the office, but if you call and leave a message, we'll get that and get right back to you. You can also send me an email at mmote1@utk.edu. Well, folks, that's about all that I have for you today. I hope you found this information useful, and I hope you'll tune in again. Until next time, this is Mitchell Mote from the University of Tennessee and Tennessee State University Extension Program saying so long.